Today we're going to talk about something that many people live through quietly, often without realizing what's happening until the damage is already deep. This is not about weakness. This is not about being naive. This is about what happens when empathy, compassion, and emotional depth collide with someone who feeds on control. If you're an empath, you don't enter relationships looking to win or dominate. You enter wanting connection, harmony, and understanding. And that is exactly why this dynamic can take hold so powerfully. Abuse by a narcissistic personality doesn't usually begin with cruelty. It begins with intensity, with charm, with the feeling that you've finally been seen and chosen. Empaths are especially vulnerable here, not because they lack strength, but because they see potential where others see warning signs. They give the benefit of the doubt. They explain away red flags. They stay longer, believing love will heal what is broken. And slowly, without realizing it, they move through predictable stages that strip away clarity, confidence, and self-trust. What makes this experience so disorienting is that the harm is psychological, emotional, and often invisible to the outside world. There may be no bruises, but there is exhaustion. No shouting, but constant self-questioning. You start wondering why you feel smaller, quieter, more anxious, when all you did was love deeply. That confusion is not accidental. It is part of the cycle. Understanding these stages is not about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your reality. When you can name what happened, you can stop internalizing the shame. You can see the pattern for what it is, not as a personal failure, but as a dynamic that exploits empathy. And most importantly, awareness becomes the first step toward freedom, healing, and a life where your empathy is no longer used against you, but becomes your greatest strength again. The awakening is often the most confusing stage because it doesn't feel like abuse at first. It feels like connection. It feels like finally meeting someone who sees your depth, your generosity, your emotional intelligence. As an empath, you lead with kindness. You listen closely. You give second chances. You believe that love, patience, and understanding can bring out the best in people. And in healthy relationships, those qualities are a gift. But in this dynamic, they become an open invitation for manipulation. At this stage, your kindness becomes their playground. Not because you offered too much, but because they learned quickly that your empathy has no off switch. They test boundaries subtly. A small disrespect here, a backhanded comment there. Each time you explain it away, you tell yourself they're stressed, wounded, misunderstood. You become the emotional caretaker, the translator of their behavior, the one who absorbs discomfort so the relationship can keep its fragile peace. Without realizing it, you are being trained to override your instincts. This awakening is quiet. There is no dramatic explosion. Instead, there is a growing sense of unease. You feel tired after conversations that should feel safe. You notice that your needs are always postponed, your feelings minimized, your reality questioned. Yet you stay because you remember how good it felt in the beginning. You chase that version of them, believing it will return if you just love harder, explain better, stay calmer. That hope keeps you stuck longer than logic ever could. What's happening beneath the surface is a slow erosion of self-trust. You stop checking in with yourself and start checking in with their moods. You measure your words, manage their reactions, and anticipate their needs while quietly abandoning your own. And the most painful part is that you don't recognize this as harm. You call it loyalty, you call it compassion, you call it being strong. But strength should never require self-erasure. The awakening begins the moment you notice that your kindness is no longer mutual, that your generosity is expected, not appreciated, that your empathy is being used to excuse behavior that hurts you. This realization can feel destabilizing because it challenges the story you've told yourself about love and responsibility. But it is also the first crack in the illusion. Awakening does not mean instant clarity or immediate escape. It means the fog starts to lift. You begin to sense that something is off. even if you can't yet name it. And that awareness, however small, is powerful. Because once you see that your kindness has been turned into a tool against you, you can no longer unsee it. This stage plants the seed of self-protection, the beginning of choosing yourself, and the quiet reclaiming of a truth you were never meant to lose. At this stage, the quiet cracks of awakening widen into a persistent erosion that feels almost invisible at first. It begins not with shouts or anger, but with small, almost imperceptible shifts in how you experience yourself in the relationship. The love that once felt expansive, safe, and nourishing begins to feel conditional. Every word you say, every choice you make, seems to be measured against an invisible standard that you can never quite reach. The ground beneath your confidence starts to give way, and you don't even realize it. You begin questioning your instincts, your perceptions, and even your worth. This erosion happens through subtle undermining. A comment dismissed as a joke, a critique wrapped in concern, a suggestion that your memory or judgment is faulty. These are the tools of emotional manipulation that make you second-guess yourself. At first, you rationalize, you justify, you tell yourself you are overreacting. That self-doubt is not born from weakness, it is cultivated intentionally. Your empath heart interprets their discomfort as a signal to adapt, to please, to protect the fragile connection you so desperately value. Slowly, you start prioritizing their reality over your own. Love, in this stage, begins to feel heavy. It no longer uplifts you, but demands constant vigilance. You monitor your reactions, your words, your emotions, because the smallest misstep could provoke disapproval, withdrawal, or subtle punishment. The person you trusted to honor your heart is teaching you to distrust it. Every affectionate gesture you once freely gave now comes with an internal calculation. Will this please them? Will this invite anger? Will this be twisted into criticism? You start measuring your generosity, your patience. You are very being against standards that are invisible, moving, and unattainable. The erosion reaches deeply into your self-concept. You might notice yourself shrinking in social spaces, silencing opinions you once voiced freely, avoiding conflict at all costs. Even your body responds, tension, fatigue, and a creeping sense of heaviness that has nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with the internalization of another's control. This is the stage where empaths feel most alone, even when surrounded by people. Because the internal critic has been amplified and disguised as love. Yet within this erosion lies the seeds of resilience. The moment you recognize the pattern, even faintly, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Understanding that self-doubt is a tool, not a truth, begins to loosen its grip. You start to remember your own instincts, your own voice, your own worth. The erosion may continue if unchallenged, but awareness is the first act of resistance. By noticing how love has been used to undermine rather than uplift, you can begin to separate the relationship from the narrative imposed upon you and start the slow, powerful work of reclaiming your clarity, your confidence, and the authentic love you deserve. The breaking point is unlike any other stage because it is both quiet and thunderous at the same time. It is the moment when your internal boundaries, long eroded, suddenly demand recognition. It does not arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a loud declaration. It arrives as a still, unwavering, knowing that enough is enough. Your heart may have given endlessly, your mind may have rationalized endlessly, and your soul may have tolerated endlessly, but there comes a point when silence becomes louder than words. That silence is not passivity. It is the first act of reclaiming yourself. This stage is the culmination of years of giving, explaining, forgiving, and bending to maintain peace that was never mutual. The weight of constantly questioning yourself, of doubting your instincts, of navigating their ever-shifting expectations becomes unbearable. You feel the edges of your identity fraying, and you realize that staying silent no longer serves their control, but serves your survival. The act of not engaging is no longer weakness, it is an assertion of self. Each moment of withheld reaction, each choice not to defend or explain, is a declaration that your energy, your presence, and your life are yours to protect. The breaking point is also intensely clarifying. In that stillness, you can feel the difference between obligation and authenticity. You recognize that every attempt to appease, to manage, to anticipate their moods was never about harmony, it was about control. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting the truth that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your inner world to preserve the illusion of connection. It is in this quiet defiance that empowerment begins to emerge. The person who once dictated your emotions, who thrived on your confusion, now faces the void of your non-participation. Without a single word, you are already taking back authority over your own life. This stage is often accompanied by fear, because breaking free, even quietly, challenges everything you have believed about loyalty, love, and responsibility. You may feel guilt for putting your needs first, or doubt whether you have the right to stand firm. But the truth is that freedom is not granted by others, it is claimed internally. Your silence, your refusal to react, your boundary that is now uncompromising speaks volumes to the parts of you that were ignored, minimized, or erased. At the breaking point, clarity and courage intersect. You begin to see the full picture, the manipulation, the erosion, the repeated violations of trust. And you understand that staying silent is not surrender. It is a strategic, conscious, and necessary step toward liberation. In this stillness, the voice of your authentic self rises, and it is louder, stronger, and clearer than any attempt to control you ever was. The breaking point is not the end of your story. It is the first bold step toward reclaiming your power, your voice, and your life. The rise is the stage where the storm begins to clear, and the pieces of yourself that were lost, silenced, or minimized start to return. It is a slow, deliberate, and deeply empowering process. After enduring emotional warfare, after navigating manipulation, self-doubt, and the weight of constant erosion, you finally recognize that the power you sought externally was never theirs to give. It was inside you all along, waiting for the moment you claimed it. This stage is not sudden. It does not happen overnight. It begins with small, intentional acts of self-recognition and self-respect. Reclaiming your power starts with noticing the patterns you were caught in. You see the cycles of giving and depletion, the ways your empathy was weaponized, and the subtle erosion of your confidence. Awareness alone does not heal, but it lays the foundation. You begin to separate your truth from the distorted reality that was imposed upon you. You learn to trust your instincts again, to honor your feelings without apology, and to reject the internalized narratives that told you your needs were unimportant. Each step towards self-trust strengthens your foundation and makes it harder for others to manipulate or undermine you again. Empowerment in this stage is not about revenge or proving them wrong. It is about restoring your agency. It is about creating boundaries that protect your emotional and mental space. It is about choosing how, when, and with whom you engage. Every act of self-care, every decision that aligns with your authentic values, every refusal to participate in their games, reinforces your sovereignty. You learn that your empathy is not a weakness but a strength, a guide to deeper understanding, connection, and love. This time directed toward yourself and those who truly deserve it. The rise also includes reclaiming joy and curiosity, the aspects of life that were overshadowed by fear, guilt, and hypervigilance. You explore passions, relationships, and experiences without the cloud of self-doubt. You notice the subtle changes, confidence in your voice, steadiness in your emotions, clarity in your decisions. Each victory, no matter how small, reinforces the knowledge that you are whole, capable, and deserving of respect. You no longer chase validation from someone who never intended to give it. Instead, you cultivate validation from within and from healthy, reciprocal connections. This stage is transformative because it turns trauma into wisdom, pain into power, and survival into mastery. You emerge not hardened, but wiser, not smaller, but expanded. The eyes is the culmination of courage, awareness, and resilience. It is the recognition that the emotional battles you endured were not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a testament to your capacity to feel deeply and endure profoundly. As you reclaim your power, you step into a life defined not by manipulation, fear, or erosion, but by clarity, choice, and the unwavering knowledge that your empathy, strength, and voice are yours to hold, nurture, and honor. The journey through abuse is never simple, and the stages of awakening, erosion, breaking point, and rise are not linear. Each stage leaves marks, but those marks are proof of resilience, not failure. Every moment you questioned yourself, every boundary you finally set, every silence that screamed for your freedom, these were acts of courage. Even when they felt small, you endured what many could not by suppressing your sensitivity, but by learning how to protect it. You learned that kindness is not weakness, that empathy is not a vulnerability to exploit, and that love does not require self-erasure. Reclaiming your power is not about erasing the past. It is about integrating it, understanding it, and using it as a compass for the life you choose. You begin to honor your instincts, trust your voice, and recognize your worth independent of anyone else's perception. The emotional warfare no longer controls you because you have stepped out of the battlefield and into your own sovereignty. Every day becomes a practice of reclaiming joy, confidence, and clarity. Your empathy transforms from a tool used against you into your greatest strength, guiding you toward relationships, opportunities, and choices that reflect your authentic self. You are no longer a participant in someone else's manipulation. You are fully, unmistakably, and unapologetically yourself.